Hi there, this is Nick Zagar and Remy Isdaner, and we are Mirlo Real Estate Partners. Today we have Nate Woudstra here from EOS Healthcare Marketing, and we're going to be talking about demographics, data, and marketing for dentists. Our podcast, Dentalligentsia, that we can help our clients and dentists across the country make better business decisions for their practices. Welcome, Nate.
Thanks, guys. It's great to see your faces. I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. So talk to us about EOS and what you guys do.
Yeah, so EOS, we are a healthcare specific marketing firm, but there's two sides to our business. One side is data and demographics, and the other side is marketing. The data I would like to dive into, the data is real-time house level information, which is different than what you're going to find anywhere else in this industry. And the reason we know that is our CEO, Shane Harris, his brother was the key developer of IBM Watson. So when we look at data, we're looking down to the house level, to the individuals, and I can tell you super creepy things like John and Jane Smith live at this address and they have two kids and they drive to work this way and they use this kind of toothpaste and they wear dentures, so on and so forth. Again, it's wild. From a personal level, I'm creeped out by it. On the business side of things, I salivate, right? Because it's like, if I know all this stuff, then we can be very strategic when it gets to the other side of our business. And the other side of our business is marketing, which is everything marketing. I have specialists in every area. Number one, you don't want me designing a logo. I'm terrible at that. So I have professional designers and I have developers and SEO specialists, Google Ads specialists. We do direct mail and we have an actuary on staff, which we can dive into that later. But really, the whole focus of EOS is to utilize data to make better business decisions and to make informed decisions for the practices that we're working with.
I think I borrowed that word creepy from your description, and I repeat it all the time when I'm talking to doctors. And I only scratch the surface as far as, being able to convey what you do, what EOS provides. But I make sure to include the fact that, it's basically a big data analytics company who's decided to dedicate their resources to specialize in dental and the amount of information and the household penetration is, verging on creepy, and the insights that you can pull are telling. I've had the privilege of sitting, or I think Nick and I both had the privilege of sitting in on a couple of your doctor meetings with our clients where you're reading through those reports, and certainly we've tried to make sense of them and can't really, but it's always a privilege to be able to hear you explain the information, the data, in a way that leads to informed decision making ultimately.
And also, I would like to say, for the purposes of this discussion, let's talk a lot about the startup dentist, and we can also talk about the legacy dentist who, maybe they're thinking, they're still in mid-career and they still, can make decisions and want to kind of increase the profitability and, and that, marketing, relocating, expanding, all those types of events can kind of still happen. And so really, when we ask these questions, you can, I guess, use those two lenses to answer them. So obviously we've worked together quite a bit, but I would imagine when you have a successful, when you do a successful startup or you provide some expert guidance, it's really rewarding. Is there any great stories that you guys can, you can
Yeah.
tell us about?
Yeah. I mean, the excitement is in the practice, right? So like we do everything that we do, you guys do what you do, but really the excitement comes at the end when you see these practices having the successes that they're having, right? That's what we're looking for. And there's all different stories. There's tons of different stories. There's stories of docs in extremely competitive markets that we still find a way, right? And we claw and tooth our way out of that market. And it takes a little bit more time in most cases in those types of markets. But when we get to that successful point, everybody's just like, it's a sigh of, we've done it. right? And there is nothing better than that. And hearing clients come back to you with, "Hey, I'm ready to do the next one. I'm ready to open up number two." I had Last year we had 8 practices. I say last year because we're coming up now to that year mark. Well, we have 8 practices last year that did over 2.5 million in their first year as startup practices, which is absolutely incredible. And we can tell those stories, but we also have to tell the context of them, because it's not just, you do that in any market that you open in, no matter where it is. That's a possibility. Well, everything kind of has to fit the mold. And why data is so important is because it helps in all aspects of the business. It helps in all timelines, from beginning and startup to growth to that maturation and to the blue sky and sell, right? And data can be involved in every single process for these practices. And we've seen a significant amount of uptick in existing doctors that are looking to take their practice to the next level. But just like a doctor seeing me for the first time, or if I were to come in and say, "Hey, I think I have this problem," they're not going to just give me the solution over the phone. They usually want to see you. They want to do their research, do an exam, figure out what's happening, maybe take x-rays, and then develop a treatment plan that's going to solve the problem that I'm having. And what we are trying to accomplish that is very different in this market is, I won't give you the answer to the test until I have the data to get me to that answer, right? I'm not going to tell you, "Oh yeah, you should do social media," just arbitrarily, because I know you know the word social media and you may not know the word search engine optimization or Google advertising. But social media, being that buzzword, is where a lot of people go. And unless the data supports it, I don't want to go down the path until I know, right? I don't want to start drilling until I know where to drill.
How important is Google? How important is your presence, reviews, etc.?
It's very important, right? In the beginning, from a startup standpoint, reviews are tough, right? Because you don't have hundreds and hundreds of reviews right away. But you shouldn't not do them because you don't have them, right? You should be actively trying to obtain reviews from your client, from your patients that are coming through the door as a startup business, and you want to grow that. And Google's looking at not only how many reviews you have, but they're also looking at the growth process of them and how they're growing. And it's funny that you say, like, how important is Google? Well, it's the only thing we talk about when we talk about digital marketing, right? We're not talking about, well, let's make sure we're number one on Bing, right? Google is the driver, and then all the other search engines, like the information and what we're doing from like an SEO perspective, is being pushed to the other search engines. But if you looked at the amount of people that search on Google versus all the other ones, it's focus your areas to where you're going to get the majority of your business, right? But yeah.
Yes, that's a great answer, and it becomes more and more apparent every day how important those reviews are in your presence. Are you working with doctors on the ask? For example, is a verbal request at the end of an appointment? Is it something that is embedded into emails or text reminders? Can you talk to us about how do you make that request?
Yeah. So I talk to doctors about strategy, right? There's obviously third-party strategies where you can basically say, "Hey, anybody that leaves the office is going to get a little message from me, and it says, 'Did you have a good experience with us? Yes or no?' And if it's a yes, it goes to Google to have somebody leave a review. If it's a no, send them to a messaging portal where they can message you directly and hopefully not leave you a review, right? Which I'm fine with, right? If very busy and you don't have the time to sit down or ask a patient for a review, then wonderful. Those are great tools to utilize. But I think the most effective way to really obtain reviews is for the doctor themselves to connect with the patient and ask, right? It's oftentimes people are afraid to ask, right? They're afraid to ask those questions. The worst thing somebody can say is no, right? Or you address any type of concerns they had right then and there, and you just hammer it out and we're done, right? So I've noticed that the practices that do the best with this are the ones where you have a doctor that connects really well with the patient and is willing to ask for those reviews. And then they'll get to a point where the third party software makes more sense for them. But I would be strategic about obtaining reviews and about how you're asking. And I think different practices will ask for different reasons. And that's why it's not all just, hey, will you leave me a review? It's connecting with them, having them feel like they're part of this growing business that you're starting. And that gets them kind of bought in a little bit more. Number one is a patient, and number two is they feel like they're helping a business grow.
So how can dentists use data analytics to better understand their competition and then differentiate themselves from there?
Yeah, so let's talk about data and analytics and then the use cases, right? So yes, you can understand your competition, and that's really important. And you have a multitude of different ways that we can go about it, which is diving into the services they're providing. You can dive into the reviews that they're getting and what those look like. Are they good reviews? Are there bad reviews? Anything like that. You can dive into oftentimes practices are just outright showing what pricing they're charging for a lot of things. So you have an idea of where are we landing in relation to some of these practices around us. But really, we can always concern ourselves with competition, but I think data and utilizing the information to understand who is in the market and then developing the story to reach those individuals in the market is the best way to compete against anybody, right? I don't need to Oftentimes we don't need to concern ourselves too much with, well, they're changing their price to this, so we should change our pricing a little bit as well. Run your practice. Run your practice based on what's happening in the market, right? Run your practice based on who you're trying to bring through the door and what type of practice you're trying to promote in a market. You don't want to follow, again, a practice that might be focused heavily on Medicaid and you're trying to be fee for service, right? You're going to have completely different clientele types, and you don't want to copy what they do because they're marketing to a different consumer, a different patient type in that market. We want to market to the individuals that meet the needs for the practice, that are looking for the experience that the practice is providing, whether that be a Medicaid focused practice, whether that be a PPO practice or a fee for service practice, or a mix of everything. You market to the market, and then as long as we have enough opportunity and the competition is not just ridiculously saturated, we'll find success, right? Because I'm not going to concern myself with, oh, there's Dr. Joe is doing X. I'm going to look at what do I need to do to relate to these individuals and how do I stand out from my competition.
As you were describing that, it was really interesting because I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is it's a nice town. However, I imagine as far as cities are concerned, it's fairly transient. We have a big portion of the population are students at the University of Michigan, and then our largest employer in this county is also the University of Michigan and their health systems. And in my neighborhood, it seems like there are doctors, not necessarily dentists, but doctors that come in, they work for the university, and then they write some papers, get some notoriety, and then get a better job somewhere else or get another job and relocate their family. So there's a lot of transients. And it seems like in a situation like that, yeah, you got to kind of always be on your A game, because there's, there's potentially more churn than a typical city, for example.
Well, and that's very important to know about, all right, when you're looking at a market and understanding when you have a huge university like the University of Michigan in a city, you have to be aware that there is a lot of movement happening, right? People moving in, people moving out. The nice thing about having a very successful university there is, when people move out, others are going to be moving in, right? The trick to that, and what we need to be able to tell our clients that are moving into an area like that is, look, marketing is something you're always going to be doing. And not only that, you always have to be at the cutting edge of what marketing is doing, because you're always trying to attract new patients to the practice, because you know that these people will be moving at some point. right? So a lot of dentists, when they get out of school, they go work for a practice that maybe has been around for a while and is doing zero marketing, right? Because they live in a market that is very stable. People aren't moving out of it, and they built up their patient base to the point where they needed it, and they really don't have to do much outside of word of mouth that they're going to bring in to supplement the small amount of people that will leave. Well, you don't want to go and do that in a market that has a large university in it, because you're not going to bring in enough patients for the people that are leaving the town. And it's nothing that you're doing. It's just, hey, and this happens in a lot of large cities as well, because people tend to live downtown in those metro areas until they then have kids, and then they tend to move out of those large areas. So when you're in a market with a lot of movement happening, you just are always going to be marketing, and you always want to stay up to date with your marketing, or else you can slowly start to fade away in the background because somebody else will be.
So
Yeah. So you take this one, Nick.
what I was going to say is, speaking of that, what are the trends that a dentist right now can use to stay ahead of the curve, and use that data, I guess, to keep.
Yeah, well, I think some of the buzzwords that are out there right now are things like artificial intelligence, right? AI. AI is great, right? It's a tool that's being utilized. That's how we have to look at AI. AI is not going to solve all your problems or make you a better dentist or anything like that. They're not going to, you know, be drilling for you, but they can help you with being able to understand information very quickly. Artificial intelligence is one of these buzzwords that I keep hearing, and doctors kind of gravitate towards it, but we need to be aware of what that is. It helps us with coding, it helps us with content development, it helps us with a lot of these areas, but it's only as good as the person that is using the tool, right?
Give us an example of how dentists are using and applying it. Look, we're all on board with AI. We love it. We use it, weekly, including in post production for these podcasts. So, give us an example of how doctors are using and applying it.
So what I've seen most often is it's going to be very beneficial for writing content for blogs, right? Because you can put in your key points that you want to talk about and include certain keywords, and it creates you a blog in a second, right? That you can then put live to your website, and that's beneficial, right? But again, it comes down to AI can write you a blog, but when we're trying to write blogs, we're doing it for a purpose, and we're trying to build authority with Google, right? So AI is only as good as the person that's putting in the sequence of information that we want to AI to then pull out, right? And then when you write, you're writing to satisfy this big entity of Google, and they're looking in your market for certain keywords based on what people are searching. So if we're not importing things properly, we're not going to get the outcome that we're looking for. It'll be good, right? Because it's a machine writing it, so it oftentimes sounds smarter than anything I would write, right? But in the end, it's all about the input that you're putting in to get the correct output that's beneficial, and then making adjustments to that so that it's real for the market that you're in.
So I'd be lying if I said you don't make data fun. You do, and we've been excited to have you on here to talk about the said data. And so I'm going to take a quick step back because we dove right in. What were you doing? Forgive me, because I feel like we've talked about this, although it's been some time. What were you doing before you were serving the dental community, and how did you get into this space?
So before I was at EOS, which has been 10 years now, I was doing IT for dental practices. And to be frank, I was helping practices get good IT people for their practices. I wasn't doing IT, just like I'm currently not a designer. And I always joke that once you get into the dent industry, there's a door that slams behind you and you can never leave. It's a great market to be in, and it's a lot of fun, right? It's resistant to a lot of things that happen in markets, and that's what drew me to EOS. And I started EOS in Texas. I was in Houston, Texas. I built out our Houston market, then expanded into San Antonio, Austin, then into Dallas, and then I expanded that into the Western US, where I was in charge of all 25 states, and now I cover the entire nation. So I talk to every doctor that comes through our door. So I am constantly, I always say I'm either very good at puzzles or I'm a constant problem solver now. And it's something that I absolutely love doing. I love taking something that is an idea like a practice and having that come to fruition. And not only just like, we're doing all right. It's, I want my practices to dominate markets. Like that's when I'm happy, right? And it's not always, oh, we need to invest more money into doing this. Like I have doctors that come to me all the time. Again, one of the guys just reached out to me. He's like he did 2.5 in his first year. He's like, Nate, I have an extra like $4,000 I can put towards marketing. Like, what should I do with that? I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I love the enthusiasm. I love the enthusiasm. But let's take a step back. Let's see where this is going to be best utilized. It's not just spend money to spend money. It's let's invest into the things that are going to make us those returns and know when we're investing too much, right? Which you don't expect to hear from a marketing company because everybody assumes that we just want to take as much money as possible. But really it comes down to like, I want to have successful practices. Successful practices are going to be the longevity of our company. I mean, Shane started this back in 2001, and we've only been where we are and grown to where we've grown to by focusing on making sure that our clients are successful.
That's really cool. I think from our perspective as commercial real estate agents, a lot of times we will meet a early career dentist who's trying to figure out, do I buy a practice? Do I start up? And more often than not, they have a location in their mind, whether or not the demographics would be good or bad or whatever, they have, I want to be in, I would like to be in these three communities, and then we'll start to kind of get get excited and start doing some research and whatnot. What type of advice would you have to someone who is at that stage? Or what type of questions should we be asking them on the front end so that we can best serve them?
Oh, I love it, right? This is something that I talk about probably every single day with multiple doctors that are looking to start their practice. They come to me and they either have a location, a very specific location that they want to be, or a specific town that they want to be in, or even a neighborhood that they want to be in, right? And then some doctors are like, hey, like I'll go anywhere in the US, like just where should I go, right? Which is that's gonna be a lot of work. But what I talk to doctors about is, look, number one, we want to let the data guide the process, but data is a chicken and an egg scenario, right? I could go and I could tell you the exact street corner that's going to yield you the best results possible for your practice. Is there something available there? I don't know. Like, do we want to chase the ghost and hope that something comes up available at that specific location? Or can we be very successful in an available location that's close to that area? Right. And that's what I talk to doctors all the time. I'm like, look, I can pull data on your entire state and we can find out, okay, in Michigan, where is the best place to go? But you're going to then have number one, it's going to be expensive to pull all of that data. And number two is it's a lot of that data is going to be rendered useless because you're going to go into one location, right? So I always say, let's hone it into a few areas that from a personal standpoint you'd like to live. You feel like it's going to be a good market. Do a little bit of digging to make sure that you're going to be comfortable in this area and do what you're hoping to do, and then sit down with people like yourselves to make sure there's availability in that market so that we aren't pulling data before we know that. We want to make sure there's an option so that when we pull the data, if there is, hey, this does look very good, that they can pull the trigger, right? Because timing in a lot of markets across the US is extremely important. So you want to be ready to go when the data comes back and says, yeah, this is a good market. But I usually say take things segment by segment, right? Let's look at these smaller areas as long as there's availability and that there's options for you if the data comes back as good, right? If the data comes back as bad, then let's move to the next area, right? But everybody has, that place that they're like, hey, I'm like to be here, that from a personal level, my family has good schools, whatever that may be. And let's start there. And then make sure, hey, is there an option for us to move forward with? And then we can expand out from there. Now, that is, again, probably the most fiscally responsible way to go about it, but it also takes some knowing of where you want to be. If you are actively and completely open, then I would pull a larger area analysis. I would pull the data to say, okay, where is the best place for me to open? And I would look at a much larger area and then hone in and see about availability in the areas that come back as the most fruitful. But you have to know going into that there might not be something available on the exact street corner that you want to be.
Once you've identified a geographic area, a municipality, a county, once you have that defined, what are some of the key demographic factors that dentists should consider when choosing their location,
Well,
specifically for their first practice?
Well, I think the data is the most important thing. So, like, there's a lot of key factors that you look at, but where the data is coming from is vital, right? So, there's multiple sources of where data comes from. One is the census. Census information, if somebody says census, just run. It means they don't know, right? Because the way census data is pulled, it's based off of a survey we all fill out once every 10 years. They take that information, project forward for the next 10 years, but it takes them 3+ years to compile that data before it's released. So you're looking at data that is outdated, right? So that's really tough to trust. Plus, it's based off of a survey. So you're looking at it and saying, well, hopefully everybody's truthful, right? On their surveys versus real time data, right? So the data itself is something that you have to ask questions about. Where is this information coming from? Is it census block data? Is it household data? What are we looking at? And then you look at some of the key factors, which would be, your population to practice ratio, and that's going to differ whether you're a general dentist, a pediatric dentist, a orthodontist, a oral surgeon, a prosthodontist, all these different specialties, right? And what we're looking for with those ratios will change based on what you're trying to do. Once you have that, that's great. Then you have to really understand, okay, what type of practice am I trying to open? Am I trying to open a higher end practice, or am I trying to open a general practice and see everybody? Am I going to accept insurances? Am I not? And the reason we need to know that is because then when we start diving into things like income, right? We know, is the income going to be right for your practice, right? But income, you could have a great ratio and low income, and it could be good for somebody trying to do more of the Medicaid side of things and not somebody trying to do that fee for service type of practice. And then you're looking for growth. Is the market growing? Is it stagnant? Is there opportunity in new homes? Are there new rooftops going into neighborhoods that are within driving distance to your practice? You look at household stability rates in the market. So, for instance, and right around the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, you're probably going to see a high amount of newer residents in the market and then a low amount of residents that have been there over 10 years. And you're going to have this happy medium right in the middle just because there's just some turnover there. So those are elements that we need to look at as well. But it's a mix of all of these things. One thing on its own, like competition, is not enough to justify this is a good market, right? We need to know what we're getting into, down to, where is the competition? Income, does the income meet the needs from a market? Because a market can be viable for one doctor and not another, right? So it's a multitude of different factors that go into it.
So in a situation where there is a lot of competition, and you're able to really analyze, like, potentially what type of patients the other practices may be serving compared to what our doc, what their primary focus would be, and use those as tools to differentiate.
Yeah. So we can definitely look at it from that point, right? But we can also look and we can count the individual homes that would qualify for a practice, right? So we can say, okay, in the immediate market of your practice, you have 45,000 households would be considered part of your immediate footprint, where 80% of your patients should be coming from. Well, I can narrow it down to the individual homes that actually have the ability or have the probability of making a dental decision. right? They're a high probability case or household that we would want to get in front of. So let's say, okay, you have 45,000 households in your immediate market. Well, 7,825 of them would be the ones that we want to invest into, right? And then I can go in individually and say, okay, well, we're going to invest in this one because they're focused on quality products and you're trying to be a high quality brand. They have the money to come through your door. They drive a Range Rover by your practice every day. Yeah, let's target them. So on and so forth. Like we can, we definitely need to be aware of competition, right? But what I'm getting at is if I can go into a market and I can target all of the qualified households for what you're trying to do as a practice, and we can hit on the things that make them tick. I don't really care what the competition's doing at that point, right? Because I'm actively pinpointing all the homes that we want coming through the door, and I'm marketing to them specifically. And again, the beauty of what we do is no one else can do that, right? No one else has that access.
So you guys you're obviously able to provide, deep dive demographics to help make informed decisions. You also design comprehensive market strategies for practices. And I know those are related but separate services. How, as a percentage, how much of your business, or how often is it that you're just providing the demographics or just the marketing versus both?
Versus both. So
Yeah,
anybody that gets to the marketing has both demographics. Right?
fair enough.
So that's 100%. Um, and then we do have, I would say, all of the people that reach out to us, I would say like 50% of them are just going to see the demographics. But again, it's usually for different reasons. It's looking at it and saying, okay, yes, this is a good market, or and oh, shoot, I can't get financing, or hey, I found this great market, but I didn't see if there was availability, or my space is gone, or somebody else bought the practice, that type of thing.
It's
So
interesting
inevitably, yeah.
from our perspective because we've been, I mean, there's countless opportunities we've worked on together where we've gone through the demographic component on the front end, and I was just thinking about how many of those mutual clients have worked with you thereafter on the marketing side, and I have no idea because by that time, those are two different stages, right? And we're involved in the front end, but I feel like they start to work with you in the marketing before they open, but much further down the line after they've signed a lease or purchased a building, and there's a million things that happen between that time and
Yeah.
and the end goal of the marketing campaign launching.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's something that like we could sit down and I could go through every single one that's done it. But I would say on average, like once you pull the data, if you end up signing a lease, it's about a 50% chance that you're going to be working with me on the marketing. And it's probably being a little bit safe. It's probably slightly higher on that. But really again, like when we take the information, right? And we're saying, okay, so we see the pathway, right? We see the homes that we need to target. We know what they respond to, and we know what your goals are for the practice. It just makes perfect sense that we utilize this data properly to market the practice, right? So it's somewhat of a natural transition from here's the data. Yes, I signed the lease to marketing on the back end with us because again, we utilize that data with every vertical of marketing that we're doing. It's being used.
So how are you actually, let me rephrase that question. We have the data, and I imagine there's a multitude of ways that you can reach those specific rooftops. You can send them a postcard, you can send them a letter, but can you actually send Google, or have Google ads, or how can you guys get, and what are,
So yeah, you kind of hit on it. You're going to hit on some things that are going to be very targeted. Like direct mail, I can target John Smith and his house, right? Because he meets all the criteria that we need. Well, John Smith might live in a neighborhood where actually the majority of the neighborhood is qualified to come through the door. So I can go online and I can target that area with Google advertising, right? But that's going to be a little bit more of an area draw. And then the question is going to become, do we need to be, right? So Google advertising is something that we can have a larger footprint, but we can focus on who we want to show up for based on how they're searching. So when I look at markets, you know, and look at households, I'm looking at the ones, okay, are these homes that we invest more money into forcing them to see us? And what areas do we want to be available for people that are going to be searching for what it is that we do? Right. And that's going to be a differentiator from, like, again, a target and a push marketing campaign to a pull, right? Google advertising it's all well and good, but if nobody's searching for a dentist, then Google advertising is not going to do anything for you, right? You need somebody to be searching for a dentist so that you can show up and that ad shows up. Wonderful. Well, you also want to be careful because you can waste a lot of money with Google ads on people that aren't intentful on their search, right? If you put in an ad that, you know, anybody that types in the word dentist anywhere in their search, you show up for, well, that'd be a waste of money because some of those searches could be, what does a dentist do? How much does a dentist make? How long does a dentist go to school for? None of which shows intent. So I don't want to waste money on the potential of having somebody click on that. I want to be very strategic on, number one, where do we want to show up for? So location and then intent of the search.
You, switching gears, you had mentioned a couple times startups that are grossing $2.5 million. Obviously, there's not, inside of this dialogue, you're not going to be able to, provide the magic bullet, but give us a couple key things that some of these people in that situation should be looking at strongly.
Well, I
If they
think
want to.
number one, they were in locations that made sense, right? So they were in underserved markets, which we helped them find the markets where they could be successful. And they worked with, again, real estate individuals to find locations within those areas where we can find success. Right? So that's step one, because I could be the best marketing
Define
company in the world.
underserved.
So just to give you one example of them, they were in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It was about 3,800 to 1 population to practice ratio for a general dentist. And they were doing everything. The income was mid-high. And again, there weren't any real close dental offices. It wasn't like one on one side of the strip mall and the other on the other. So we had a good market to go into. I've seen markets that are much better than 3,800 to 1, but 3,800 to 1 is good. I want to be above 2,300 to 1 is what I would like to do. I know most banks want to be above 2,000 to 1. Starting off with a good market was important, and then investing into that market was the key, right? So you can be in a great market and you'll probably do fine, with a minimal investment, right? But when you're in a great market, why not invest into making huge returns, right? So if you know about a great market and you're like, oh, perfect, it'll come to me, well, you're going to miss the boat. I always joke, it's kind of like if you knew about Apple stock before Apple stock blew up, right? Would you invest enough to, like, hey, I'm going to be good, I'm going to make enough? Or would you sell your dog? I would sell the dog. I would be like, all right, I need as much money as I physically can. I'm going to put it all into here because I know the returns are going to be exponential, right? So when you look at a good market and you start looking at it this way, these practices that understood it and had the ability to, that's the other thing is I understand that not everybody's going to have the budgets that like this practice had. It was around, they invested in their first year about $110,000, which is not normal for a startup practice, right? But they had some money saved up that they invested out of their personal funds because they saw the data of the market. Well, $110,000 to make 2.5 million is a pretty solid investment.
How many ops did they start out with?
They
12,
started off
12
with
ops?
4, but it was 2 doctors and they expanded very quickly. So it was basically they had their equipment company on call to add in the next op and everything was plumbed. I want to say they have 8 or 9 ops, but I don't quote me on that. I have to look.
That's incredible, and we understand. Full disclosure, anyone watching that's not common or normal,
Yes.
and when it comes to setting expectations, let's keep them realistic. But it's still wild to think about the fact that those practices do exist, and I'm also relieved that you said you'd sell your dog because I was thinking it and thinking, is that the way wrong answer? Don't judge me, but I'd sell
Yeah.
more than my dog.
Yeah.
So, um, I guess with respect to those, that 20, you said 2,000, 2,300
2,300 to 1.
population ratio to practice. Obviously, that changes in an urban versus suburban setting.
Yeah.
Can you share any more? And I recognize that it's all relative and everyone's situation is
Yes.
somewhat unique. But any
Yes.
other fun metrics that you can share that people can latch onto?
So yeah, the 2,300 to 1, I always say is like, this is your benchmark. But
For a generalist.
for a general dentist,
Okay.
yes. Like for a pediatric dentist, I always joke, I'm like, it could be 1,000,000 to 1. But if it's 0% household with kids, it doesn't really matter for you, right? And that's where these things start to fluctuate, right? And this is cool for like a pediatric dentist. If you're at, I like to be above 10,000 to 1, and then I want to have 50% households with children, right? So now if we look at the market and we're at 25% households with children, well, that 10,001 needs to be greater, right? It needs to be higher so that we have enough kids. Or we go in and we count the exact amount of kids. If they're all right around the practice, wonderful, but that's probably not the case. And then if that number is higher, well, your ratio can come down, right? I do work with some vets as well, and same thing with vets. It's like you could have 1,000,000 people if there's no pets, it doesn't matter.
We
But
all sold
we
our
will,
dogs anyway. So
yeah, we sold them. Yeah. Uh, Apple stock. That's what we can blame. But yeah, those are fun things. But we look at everything adjusts, right? And it's not a end all be all. Well, I'm not at 2,300 to 1, so I can't be successful. No, that's not the case. Like we have to look and see, okay, do we have the qualified homes, and do we have the ability to get in front of people? What is the competition doing? So if you're at, hey, I have a market that I really like, but it's closer to like 1,300 to 1, can I be successful there? Well, let's look at it, right? Let's see what the opportunity is. Let's see what the competition's doing. What are we doing to set ourselves apart? Do we have a budget to be able to compete in this market? So on and so forth. Like, it is not an end all be all. These things are just general metrics so that we can get a baseline of, hey, where are we at baseline? And then we can look at the different areas of opportunity and challenges for.
yeah, people hire us to help them gather data so that they can make these really expensive decisions, especially as it pertains to their real estate. But they really owe it to themselves to, hook up with somebody like you guys so that they can really understand, you know, not, who they're going to be serving, and so that they can be know that they'll be happy long term making we really need to take a team approach because for all of these doctors, this is, I know they have expensive student loans and that's hard for them to sometimes fathom, but when they take on new practice debt like this, we're talking about another 800,000 or $1 million loan. And so you really can't afford to make the wrong decision. The more information that you have, the better decision you're going to be able to make, or the more informed decision you're going to be able to make.
Yeah, yeah. And again, like data it's another tool, right? It's a tool that we can use to help us make more informed decisions, but also prepare for the markets that we're going into, right? I would much rather know that there's going to be a couple challenges when I open my practice with the data that we have than bury my head in the sand and cross my fingers that it all works and then find out later, oh wait, I should have looked at the information. Yeah, I think that the team approach is vital, right? Because I don't have access to, what availability there is that meets the needs and the legal requirements for what they're trying to do, right? That's where you guys come into play, is so that we can, number one, find actual opportunistic locations, right? My job is just to assess the market and find, hey, what's the pathway to success, right? And then utilize the tools at our disposal to go and capture that success. But that looks different for everybody, right? It's not a one size fits all plan that we put together and say, well, you're a startup dentist. Here you go, open right up next to a grocery store and you'll be fine. And you do this marketing and you'll be great, right? And unfortunately, every market's different. I have a couple groups now that have 9 locations, now adding more locations, but every single one of his locations has a different marketing strategy. There is not a end all be all, this is the same for every single one. We adjust and develop for individual markets, which is, again, different than what a lot of people will do in the industry. But in the end, every market is different. People respond differently. People act differently in different areas. So we have to adjust to that.
As a percentage of total revenue, where should marketing budget be for, let's say, a startup dentist? And then same question for an established dentist who maybe doesn't have a marketing campaign or it's not working well for them and they're looking to transition.
Yeah. So the hard part is the startup is you're investing money before you have any revenue, right? And it's kind of a loaded question because every market's different, right? So for instance, like a $50,000, $60,000 investment for a startup and let's just say Holland, Michigan is going to be a lot different than $50,000 in New York City, right? It's going to go a lot further in areas like that, and so there's not a percentage, right? I think the market dictates, all right, where do we need to be, and then the revenues come. I know CPAs will say like, all right, we want to, once you have an established practice, you want to be at like 2 to 4% or something like that for marketing dollars. Maybe, but my guess is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, it should be a little bit higher
So
because
2 to 4 seems light.
yeah, yeah. CPAs, right? They don't want you to spend any money. But like again, like in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where you do have an established practice, you still probably want to be at a higher percentage of marketing because you're constantly trying to bring more people through the door. So the question becomes, okay, should we do it based off a percentage or should we look at the market and see what do we need to be successful and where do we need to hit the numbers that we need? And then we review and say, okay, what percentage is this based on the market that I'm in? It's just going to be different everywhere, right? So
That's fair
like
enough.
that's the beauty of data. Again, it all comes down to like, all right, what do I need to do in this market? What can I do to be successful faster? And that comes down to usually the budgets that we.
Yeah, no, this is these are great questions, and they're the questions that all the docs need to ask themselves because, it's like where do you live and where do you want to live and how far do you want to drive to work and who are the people that you want to, who is your avatar perfect patient? Who do you want to spend your time with? Because a lot of times we will just people can, yeah, maybe they're not using census data, but around here in Metro Detroit, they can basically say along the elbow of 696 and 275, that seems where most of the growth seems to be. I want to be in that general, in that general area. And there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of layers. So, whether you're on the east side of that highway or the west side of that highway or the north or south side or where the bodies are coming from, there's a reason why there's probably a really low ratio for general or incredibly low ratio for general dentists in Novi, right where these two major highways meet. And is it possible to be successful there? I'm sure it's possible, but you have to really know how to market to the right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then on the opposite side, it's like you could move into the middle of nowhere, right? And that's when it's okay, do I just build my own website? Well, if there's no competition around you for an hour, like yeah, just build your own website, it'll be fine.
We talk to people all the time, especially in Michigan. We're associated with a number of the different county district dental societies, and certainly in the rural areas there's a major demand, and you can see, especially because a lot of these docs are not likely, they're having problems. The ones that are at retirement age are not even able to really sell as easily because people just don't want to be there, but they can be incredibly successful. And so there's something to be said for that. But you have to really want to, you know, you really have to want to have that, and have that lifestyle. If you don't want to live in Bad Axe wherever that is, like maybe, maybe, maybe it's not the right place.
That's exactly
So
right.
you've been with EOS for 10 years, so I'm sure you've received many compliments over the years, but can you share one with us?
Yeah, I think the best ones that come up, not this one specific one comes into play, but I think, hey, Nate, you saved me from going down the wrong path, right? I think I a situation where a doctor was very kind of getting to the end of his, time where he's like, I just need to make a decision. I'm going to buy this practice, right? And somebody told him, hey, you need to talk to EOS and before you buy this practice. So we looked at it and I was like, it's going to be tough, right? I mean, it was like 420 to 1 population to practice ratio and no growth. And I was like, this is going to be a tough one. Well, we took a little bit of time, worked with a real estate agent, and we were like, let's look in this area. We looked in that area. He opened his practice. His first month had like 120 new patients, and was like, thank you. Like, I was ready to make a decision. I was ready to make any decision, but you stopped me, and we ended up doing what was best for me. It just took a little bit longer than he wanted, right? But again, those are great compliments. And again, I think the practices speak for themselves. When they're very successful, they're great, and we're constantly managing campaigns to continue to grow them. But I think the biggest compliment's just seeing successful practices that come through, which is why we continue to do what we do, why we continue to work with great partners like yourselves, is because we're all doing great work for clients. And really, like, we're all on somewhat short leashes, right? As soon as we start going down the wrong path, well, like, it's going to affect our business, right? As soon as we start cutting corners, that affects our businesses. I'm planning to be around for another, 20, 30 years. So I'm going to make sure to keep doing right by the clients.
So speaking of when, you know, when somebody is in that situation, they're trying to figure out what the right situation to choose. What is one piece of advice that you would give them?
In a situation like I just talked about, where they're
Yeah.
looking at buying it, is, hey, it might take an extra couple days, but pull data, right? Um, they're scientists, right? They go to school, they're scientists, they require data, and usually the biggest fear behind a big decision like that is this going to be a good decision? Am I going to be successful? And there's data out there that we can access so that you can know where the opportunity lies for that success, right? It's utilize the information that's readily available, right? Like, not using AI is just doesn't make sense anymore, right? Like, use the tools at your disposal. They're there. The information's out there. Use it so that you're making informed decisions so that you can have kind of that practice that you're hoping to have when you open.
What's the best advice you've ever received, and how can that translate to new dentists who are starting their career?
I think the best advice is changing the way I look at investing, right? Is there's costs that cost you money, right? Things that are going to depreciate, things that really aren't making you any money, and then there's investments that, yeah, they might be scary now, but they're going to set you up for like success, right? And somebody once explained to me, which I think is genius, but they're like, look, all the stuff that we buy, especially for like a practice, all the things that we're buying is basically money that's sitting in a bank that we can't access until we use whatever it is we bought, right? A chair. I can't access the money that I am keeping in this chair until I have somebody that's sitting in that chair. And when it was explained to me like that, I was like, okay, so we need to get people to sit in that chair, right? Because I want you to take all the money out of that bank, which is a chair, right? And that's these big loans, right? They're taking out big loans to be paid back, and they get paid back with patience.
Is there anything that we haven't asked you that we should have asked you?
No, I think you hit on all the stuff that I would, right? Again, there's so many things we could talk about, and we could talk all day about marketing and how it relates to data and demographics of a market. But I think really it's the understanding of, look, when a doctor's in a situation, they need experts to help them, right? They need somebody that understands real estate, or it's going to affect them one way or another, right? They're probably not going to get the rates that you would get because you've been negotiating leases and you've been negotiating these things for a very long time, right? If we aren't utilizing data and then data not being utilized in the marketing, well, you're going to pay for that one way or another, right? It might be cheaper to go a route with that's not using data, but is it cheaper overall, or are you going to spend way more money because you're trying to fix something or you're not getting enough patients, and now that's costing you the ability to again pull the money out of the bank, which is your chair. So I think again, what all this stuff I feel like comes down to is making sure that we are providing the information that we're experts on. I consider you guys to be experts in the real estate market. I'm an expert in the marketing department, and these doctors just need to know that there's experts to help them, right?
Absolutely. Certainly, to use the real estate analogy, if and you had already kind of touched on this, if you have chairs that are not being used, that's lost money. And so, to really maximize your profitability, the more butts that are in chairs, the better off you're going to be, and hopefully all day, every day. We do like to ask our guests one final question, and then have them ask a question for the next guest. And essentially, we were asked, and I don't know how you can answer this however you take it. What do you anticipate? How do you anticipate the dental industry being different 10 years from today, from your perspective?
I think it's going to continue to grow, and outside of I'm sure technology will change. 10 years from today, there's probably going to be more AI integrated into tools and things like that into their day to day. But I don't know. The dental industry is an interesting one because it stays pretty stable all the time. So my guess is we're still going to have dental practices 10 years from today. They're still going to be doing great dental work. I don't think it's something that robots will take over or anything like that.
And in the same vein, if you have a question that you'd like us to ask the next person, and we have all different types of guests, from commercial lenders, contractors, architects, practice consultants, you name it.
Let's see here. I would say, throwing me on the spot, I would say, what do you think is the most important piece to a successful startup? Really put them on the spot.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I mean,
I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to hear that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even bring it up, but that startups are our favorite, our favorite type of transaction. And a lot of the reason why is because they really need the most guidance, and we want to be a guide that can help them navigate through that situation and make sure that they have done the research and can make the most informed decision, because it's something that you can only make once. There aren't any do-overs in this game. It's too expensive.
Well, I think it's also what I love about startups is it's creating, again, it's the end goal, right? They're able to create the dream that they have. They're able to take their dream and make it a reality, rather than like acquisitions are great for individuals, but you're essentially getting into somebody else's dream and trying to change it, versus a startup where, hey, I got to be there from the beginning. And then when it turns out to be something huge, you're like, that was awesome. I remember when they just had this little idea and it became this huge entity.
Well, I guess on that note, I guess we can call it a wrap. This was so awesome for you to be here and drop all these wisdom bombs on us, and hopefully help some dentists out there make some better decisions. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Nate.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks, Nate. Good seeing you.
You as well.
I actually